I started meeting all of these people who expressed to me how much the show meant to them, how it lifted their spirits during a bad breakup or...
For 3 decades, one face has stayed impossibly familiar to millions of people who have never met her. She has been the woman we watched grow up on our television screens, the friend we felt like we already knew, the punchline of 1,000 magazine covers, and, through it all, someone who rarely let the cameras see past the smile. Jennifer Aniston built a career on being relatable. The girl next door who somehow also became one of the most famous women alive. But relatable and understood are not the same thing. Behind the sitcom laugh track and the red carpet gowns is a story that took Jennifer Aniston decades to tell in her own words. About family, about loss, about love that didn't survive the spotlight, and about a version of motherhood she never got to live. This is the story of how a shy, insecure kid from a broken home in New York became Rachel Green, and what it actually cost her to get there. Jennifer Joanna Aniston was born in February 1969 in Sherman Oaks, California, into a family that was already, in its own way, show business royalty of a modest kind. Her father, John Aniston, was a Greek-American actor who would go on to spend decades on the daytime soap opera Days of Our Lives. Her mother, Nancy Dow, had once modeled and acted herself. It might have looked, from a distance, like a household built for a future star. From the inside, it looked like something else entirely, a marriage under strain and a little girl trying to hold it together with jokes. The family relocated to New York City when Jennifer was young, chasing her father's television work. She has spoken publicly many times over the years about how unstable that early home life felt. Her parents' marriage was tense, and when Jennifer was 9 years old, her father moved out. For a child that age, a parent's disappearance from the house doesn't come with context or explanation. It just comes with absence. Jennifer has said in interviews that she coped by becoming the family's comic relief, the kid who could make people laugh so the tension in the room would ease, even for a moment. It's a survival skill many children of difficult marriages develop without realizing it. And in Jennifer's case, it turned out to be the earliest seed of a career. Her relationship with her mother would become one of the more complicated threads of her life, one she wouldn't fully resolve for decades. Nancy Dow had strong opinions about appearance, about weight, about how a young woman should present herself. And Jennifer has said those comments shaped her own sense of self-worth in ways that lingered long into adulthood. In later interviews, Jennifer has tried to hold 2 truths at once. That some of what she heard as a child was painful, and that her mother was, in her own way, doing the only kind of parenting she knew how to do, shaped by her own upbringing and her own insecurities. That kind of nuance, refusing to villainize a parent while still naming the hurt, is something Jennifer has returned to again and again when she's spoken about her childhood. School wasn't where Jennifer thrived. She has said she struggled academically and often felt like she wasn't smart enough to keep up, a feeling that would later make painful sense when, in her 20s, she was diagnosed with dyslexia. Before that diagnosis, though, she just carried the quiet belief that something was wrong with her. Not an uncommon experience for kids with undiagnosed learning differences, who often internalize their struggles as personal failure rather than recognizing them as a specific, nameable condition. What she did have, from an early age, was a pull toward performance. She has described going to see plays and understanding, almost instinctively, that acting was where she wanted to spend her life. Jennifer enrolled at Manhattan School of Performing Arts, a school built around exactly the kind of theater and arts education she'd been craving. It's the sort of institution most people know now because of the movie Fame, and it put Jennifer directly into a pipeline of serious, disciplined young performers. Her father, who had spent his own career navigating the unpredictability of the entertainment industry, reportedly worried about his daughter following the same path, not because he doubted her talent, but because he understood, firsthand, how brutal the odds could be. After high school, Jennifer worked the jobs most aspiring actors work. Waitressing, temp jobs, anything that paid rent between auditions. She has talked about telemarketing gigs and restaurant shifts with a kind of wry affection, the way people often do once they've made it out the other side. Her early television work in the late 1980s and early 1990s was a string of shows that came and went quickly. Pilots that didn't get picked up, series that got canceled after a handful of episodes. It's easy to forget, looking at her career now, that Jennifer Aniston spent years being the person auditioning, not the person being chased. Her film debut, a minor role in a science fiction film in the late 1980s, came and went with little notice. A supporting role in a horror movie a few years later became a minor cult favorite over time, but at the time it didn't change much about her career trajectory. What it did was keep her in the mix, keep her auditioning, keep her working, keep her visible enough to casting directors that when the right role came along, she'd be in the room for it. In 1994, a pilot script began circulating around Hollywood for a new NBC sitcom about six 20-somethings navigating life, love, and coffee shops in New York City. It would eventually be called Friends. Jennifer auditioned for the ensemble, and according to accounts from those involved in casting, she was initially considered for the role of Monica Geller, the uptight, controlling oldest sibling energy character of the group. But it was Rachel Green, the once privileged, formerly sheltered bride who ran away from her wedding, that Jennifer connected with. Courtney Cox, meanwhile, gravitated toward Monica. The two actresses effectively swapped instincts, and the roles were recast to match, a decision that, in hindsight, feels almost too perfectly suited to have been anything but fate, even though it was really just good casting instinct meeting good luck. The catch was that Jennifer was already under contract to a different show, a CBS sitcom called Muddling Through, which wasn't performing well but still had her legally tied up. She had to film the Friends pilot without any certainty she'd even be allowed to stay with the show if both series got picked up. It was, by any account, a genuine risk, the kind of decision young actors have to make without a safety net, betting on their own read of a script against the far more powerful, far more resourced instincts of network executives. As it happened, Muddling Through was not renewed, freeing Jennifer to commit fully to Friends, just as the show was gearing up to premiere. Friends debuted in September 1994, and its rise was fast and enormous. Within its first season, it had become one of the most watched shows on American television, and the six actors at its center, Jennifer Aniston, Courtney Cox, Lisa Kudrow, Matt LeBlanc, Matthew Perry, and David Schwimmer, became recognizable in a way that very few television casts before or since have experienced. Jennifer's haircut on the show, the layered style her character wore in the earliest seasons, became a genuine cultural phenomenon, copied in hair salons across the country, even though Jennifer herself has said in interviews that she wasn't especially fond of it. What made the show endure wasn't just the writing or the premise. It was the chemistry among the six leads, which by most accounts of people who worked on the show was not manufactured for cameras, but genuinely built over years of proximity, long hours, and shared experience of a fame none of them had been prepared for. The cast became known, famously, for negotiating their contracts as a unit rather than individually. All six actors insisting on pay parity regardless of who had, on paper, the more prominent storylines in a given season. By the show's later seasons, each of the six was earning roughly $1 million per episode, a deal that was, at the time, unprecedented for a television ensemble and reshaped how future ensemble casts would approach collective bargaining with networks. Fame at that scale comes with a cost that isn't always visible from the outside. Jennifer has spoken about how disorienting it was to go from being a working actress who could run errands unnoticed to someone who couldn't leave her house without being photographed. The tabloid industry of the late 1990s and 2000s was a different beast than what exists today. Less regulated, more aggressive, and often explicitly built around manufacturing narratives about young female celebrities' bodies, relationships, and private lives. Jennifer became one of its most consistent targets, a position she didn't ask for, and has said, in later years, took a real toll on her mental health and sense of privacy. During this period, her relationship with her mother reached a breaking point. In the mid-1990s, Nancy Dow gave a tabloid television interview discussing details of Jennifer's life and, not long after, published a memoir centered on their relationship as mother and daughter. For Jennifer, the book felt like a profound betrayal. A private, complicated relationship turned into content for public consumption without her consent. The two women became estranged, and Jennifer has confirmed publicly that she didn't speak to her mother for roughly 15 years afterward. It's a striking detail, in part because it complicates any easy narrative about Jennifer Aniston's life as charmed or lucky. Her fame and her family pain were happening in the very same years often over the very same headlines. In 1998, Jennifer began dating actor Brad Pitt, and their relationship quickly became one of the most publicly documented romances in modern celebrity history. They married in the summer of 2000 in a widely covered wedding in Malibu, and for a few years, Brad and Jen functioned almost as shorthand for a kind of aspirational Hollywood normalcy. Two famous, attractive people who nonetheless described themselves, in interviews at the time, as homebuddies more interested in staying in than being seen out. Their marriage ended in 2005, following a period during which Pitt had been filming Mr. and Mrs. Smith alongside Angelina Jolie. The tabloid press treated the divorce as an ongoing serial drama for years afterward, constructing a rivalry narrative between Aniston and Jolie that neither woman ever publicly engaged with as directly as the coverage implied. What is verifiable is that the divorce was finalized in 2005, that Pitt and Jolie's relationship became public not long after, and that the media coverage surrounding all of it was, by any modern standard, invasive and often cruel to everyone involved, particularly Aniston, who found herself cast in the press as either a victim to be pitted or a woman somehow responsible for her own marriage's end, often within the same news cycle. One narrative in particular frustrated Jennifer enough that she addressed it directly and on the record. The suggestion, repeated across several publications at the time, that she and Pitt divorced because she had prioritized her career over having children. In a 2005 interview with Vanity Fair, Jennifer pushed back forcefully on that framing, saying it wasn't true and expressing frustration that a divorcing man is rarely, if ever, accused of choosing his career over a family in the same way a divorcing woman is. It's a comment that, looking back, reads less like celebrity gossip and more like an early, pointed observation about a double standard she would keep running into for the rest of her career. Friends ended its 10-season run in May 2004, with a finale that drew over 50 million American viewers, one of the most watched television broadcasts of its decade. Jennifer has said in later interviews that she and the cast knew, even as they were filming those last episodes, that they were closing a chapter that could never really be reopened or replicated. The show's ensemble went their separate ways professionally, though the friendships among the cast members have, by most public accounts, endured. Jennifer's post-Friends film career was a mixed bag in its early years, the way most transitions from beloved television character to serious film actress tend to be. She appeared in comedies that performed modestly and dramas that critics either praised or dismissed, often depending on how willing they were to see her as anything other than Rachel Green. Films like The Breakup in 2006 did solid box office and carried an uncomfortable echo of her real life, given its plot centered on a couple's separation. Over the following years, she built a career as a reliable lead in both comedies and more dramatic work, steadily proving, to audiences who needed convincing, that she was a capable actress independent of the character that made her famous. Behind the scenes, Jennifer had also become a producer, founding a production company with a former partner in the early 2000s that would go on to develop and produce a range of film and television projects over the following 2 decades. It was a deliberate move into a part of the industry where actors, and particularly actresses, have historically had far less control, deciding which stories get made rather than simply appearing in the ones offered to them. Her personal life in the years following the Pitt divorce included several high-profile relationships, most of which played out under the same intense media scrutiny that had followed her since the Friends years. She has spoken about how exhausting that scrutiny became, every relationship treated as a referendum on her happiness, every public appearance analyzed for signs of heartbreak or renewal. In 2015, she married actor and screenwriter Justin Theroux, a relationship that had begun several years earlier and that, for a time, seemed to offer her a measure of the privacy she'd long wanted. The couple announced their separation in early 2018, choosing, notably, to release a joint statement asking for privacy and explicitly pushing back against tabloid speculation about the reasons behind the split. A request the press did not entirely honor, but one that reflected how much more deliberate Jennifer had become, by that point in her life, about controlling her own narrative wherever she could. In 2016, Jennifer did something that, in retrospect, marked a real turning point in how she engaged with the public conversation about her own life. She wrote a personal essay, published by the Huffington Post, responding directly to years of tabloid speculation about her body and her fertility, coverage that had, for the better part of 2 decades, treated the question of whether or not she was pregnant as a matter of ongoing public interest. In the essay, she argued that the relentless commentary on her body wasn't really about her at all. It was a symptom of a broader cultural habit of scrutinizing and evaluating women based on whether they were having children, a habit she connected to wider questions about how society values women's choices. The essay was widely read and widely discussed, and it represented a shift in tone from someone who had, for most of her career, kept her most personal opinions largely out of the press. It wasn't a tell-all. It was closer to an argument, a public figure using her own, very specific experience to make a broader point about the pressures placed on women generally, famous or not. Several years later, Jennifer went further, speaking publicly and specifically about her own struggles to have children, including undergoing IVF treatments during a period when she was, simultaneously, fielding relentless public speculation about pregnancy rumors that had no basis in reality. In an interview with Allure in 2022, she described that period as one of the hardest of her life, expressing regret that no one had encouraged her, when she was younger, to consider freezing her eggs. Information she said she simply didn't have and wished she had known earlier. It was, by any measure, a remarkably candid admission from someone who had spent years being asked invasive questions about exactly this subject by journalists who had no idea how close to the truth their intrusive guesses actually were. What made the interview resonate wasn't just the disclosure itself, but the context Jennifer gave it. Years of public speculation that she now revealed had been happening alongside a private, painful medical reality she'd never had the chance to explain on her own terms, because doing so would have meant surrendering even more of her privacy to a press that had already taken so much of it. Somewhere in the years between the height of her fame and her 50s, Jennifer Aniston's relationship with her mother quietly changed. The 15-year estrangement that began with Nancy Dow's memoir eventually ended, though Jennifer has been relatively private about the specifics of how the reconciliation happened. Nancy Dow passed away in 2016. Jennifer's public comments in the years since have suggested a relationship that, while never simple, found some resolution before her mother's death. The kind of complicated peace that doesn't erase old wounds, but allows two people to set them down. It's worth sitting with that detail because it complicates the easy version of Jennifer Aniston's story, the one where she's simply the beloved sitcom star who had it all. The real version includes a childhood shaped by a difficult marriage, a mother whose criticism left marks that lasted decades, a public estrangement that stretched across the exact years she became one of the most famous women in the world, and a reconciliation that came quietly, without a press tour, because some things are not meant to be content. Jennifer Aniston turned 55 in February 2024, and by most accounts, she has entered this stage of her life and career with more openness than at any point before it. She has continued acting steadily, taking on roles in television and film that reflect an actress with decades of range behind her rather than someone still defined by a single character from 3 decades ago. She has spoken more freely in recent interviews about aging in an industry that has historically punished women for it, about the pressure to look a certain way at every stage of life, and about choosing, increasingly, not to participate in that pressure